All right. Hello there, and I hope you're having a nice day. So today's, you can see I've written up here, meaninglessness. What does that mean? Well, just to put it in some context, today's ramble, let's call it a ramble, because that's probably what I'm going to do, is ramble about a topic. And it was inspired by my recent watching of a TV series called Fargo. And in season 2, there's a young girl who's, I'd say, in her teens, and her character's name is Noreen, and she's like an assistant in this butcher shop, and all she does is sit there and read books, and the shop's pretty quiet, so it's not very busy, and she happens to be reading Camus' book, The Myth of Sisyphus, and it reminded me of when I'd read the book and the kind of thinking that I did and the discussions I had and how it made me feel and how it made me question ideas about life and what it was about. And of course, the first thing that he says, Monsieur Albert Camus, is that, well, actually, there is no meaning, there is no purpose, there is no point to life, and therefore, what's the point of doing anything? You might as well just kill yourself. And that's what she said. That's what she said. The character in the series, Noreen, she says to her colleagues, well, in this book that I'm reading, Camus says, well, there's no real point to doing anything because, that's just a fallacy. So we might as well just kill ourselves. So I don't want to go into the logic of that statement, because that then goes on into a whole kind of philosophical discussion about absurdism, existentialism, and that's like a totally other topic. I want to take that and then make that into a more practical kind of everyday way of thinking, and how that kind of thinking and reasoning and puzzling, I suppose, has worked out in my own life. So, first of all, he says, well, there's no point, there's no meaning. So, that's the starting point. So, Sisyphus, if you don't know the story, basically, there's a guy who's got this massive boulder. It's a nice round boulder, but it's very heavy. So this guy, Sisyphus, his job, basically, he's been banished to this place where he has to push this rock up the hill. And he struggles and struggles, gets the rock to the top of the hill, and what happens? When he gets to the top of the hill, he has to let it roll down again. And then the next day, so it takes him a whole day to get the rock up there. And then it just rolls back down again. And then the next day he does it again. So it's just this kind of Groundhog Day of like exactly the same thing over and over again. There's no rhyme or reason for you to do that. And then Camus is saying, well, isn't this human life? We just kind of go through life pushing this. Each one of us is pushing this rock up the hill every day, only to have it come rolling back down for us to then do it again the following day. So this idea of there being a kind of purpose is actually false. And I came to this conclusion in my teens. I saw that people were just working. They'd get up quite early, commute, do their day of work. And I didn't know what they were doing at their work, but they seemed to complain about it. And as a teenager, it seemed like they were not really enjoying it. And then, they were tired. They had the additional commute of getting home from work. And then they had to go to bed early because they were tired and they had to get up the next morning. And, the cycle was repeating itself. So I thought, I need to make sure that I don't do this. Or by the sound of it, this is something I need to avoid. And so I made a promise to myself I'd never do that. As far as possible, I've managed that. I've worked freelance, managed my own hours. So I've kind of achieved meaning in that way, because I saw that, I don't want, this sounds like an awful kind of existing rather than living kind of way of being, so I need to avoid that. And so I started to see through this thing of purpose and meaning quite early on. But most people would argue that you need to find meaning, you need to find purpose, you need to find the point yourself, that there is such a thing. And of course, if you go back when people were more theistic, whatever religion that was, whether it's Christianity or any of the Abrahamic ones or non-Abrahamic religions, there was something just given to you within the doctrines that told you that this is the purpose, this is the sort of mission of life, like being ethical or being a good person. So that's how you should live your life. That is a good life. And if you go back further to Aristotle and Cicero, like the Romans and the Greeks, they talked about the good life, which was very much about this ethical way of being. So you were trying to be a better person yourself, and by being a better person, you were helping the rest of humanity. Or let's say just the people that you come into contact with. If you're happier and friendlier, then it kind of pulls them up as well. So the meaning or the purpose was sort of given to you. Or in Christianity, there was this is God's plan, or you're doing God's work, or you have a calling, the idea of a vocation. Nowadays it's more to do with career, and that's maybe done by kind of aptitude tests, and you kind of figure out what it is that you want to do with your life. But it's more to do with passion, and you find something that fits. I'm kind of artistic, and maybe I should be a graphic designer, say, for example. And that seems to then carry me through life. And I can have a career, go up the career ladder. So it's about finding that kind of match, if you like, between yourself and the thing that you want to do, the thing that will give life meaning and purpose. But there lies the fallacy, because you've already assumed that this thing called meaning or purpose or the point is real. And then you're kind of trying to figure out, well, what is that for me then? Before even questioning, well, what is this meaning? It's a bit like children being told about Father Christmas. Right, he comes down the chimney and he gives us he gives us the presents, and then he goes around the whole world in one night. It's magical. And you believe it. And then at certain point, whenever that is for different people, you kind of see through it and you realize it wasn't true, but at the time that you did believe it, it was something quite magical. But most people, or I'd say 99% of people, don't see through this, or they feel the sense of meaninglessness, and they then equate that with having this lack of purpose, but that they need one, because that's what you've grown up with, that you need to find some kind of purpose, which used to be, doctrinal, spiritual, come theistic, traditional, to now being more to do with passion and career. Without that, you're kind of floating around in space without any sort of direction, and you experience this sense of meaninglessness. Well then, what am I doing? Who am I? Your identity is so tied up with what you do. Someone will ask you, like, well, what's your job? What do you do? So I'll say, well, I'm a wheel builder. That's what I do. Or I'm a Twitch streamer. And then, they can put you in this box, this category of, oh, you're that person, or you're a doctor, you're an astronomer, you're a university professor. So your identity becomes tied up with that thing that you do. So you kind of feel like you need that in order to be a certain kind of person. But we don't really need that. And once you start to see through it and realize that from a biological, evolutionary point of view, your purpose, the shell that is you for your DNA, is to survive and reproduce. So as long as you can survive long enough to reproduce and pass on your genes, the genes say, yep, thank you, I've made it to the next generation, you can now die. Thank you for the lift. So it's like you're an Uber just carrying your genes along, and you've done your job, so okay, see ya. And once you realize that number one, there is no such thing as meaning and purpose, it's all just been made up, and then that idea has just been passed on from generation to generation. Whenever it started, whenever we started to have consciousness of us being us, that's another conversation altogether, the whole idea of consciousness and there being a me or an I. But whenever that started, I'd say slowly, based on that and then language developing, we started to get this idea of meaning, like, well, what are we doing here then? I'm kind of pondering that question, and then that gradually became real, that there was some kind of purpose. There is no purpose, there is no meaning, there is no point. And that is what Camus is saying. You start to see through it, you see the fallacy or the mirage, and then you're left with what? Meaninglessness. So you realize it, there is no Father Christmas, so I'm left without any presents. The presents came from somewhere, but it wasn't Father Christmas. So, okay, so should you then just kill yourself because there is no point? Okay, maybe you should. And I said I wasn't going to go follow that line of argument, but there's no point to doing anything. So that's kind of what I want to get to next. So you've seen through the there being a meaning or a purpose, and you realize, okay, there isn't anything. So what is there? You can just kind of survive, reproduce, pass on your genes, and then do whatever, basically. It doesn't really matter whether you do or you don't do. But you're still left with meaninglessness. And that is a feeling. It's not sort of quantifiable. I don't know how you'd measure if you have a lot of purposelessness or a little bit. I guess you just gauge that yourself. But for me, when I started to feel that, having kind of seen through it, maybe let's say, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, I started to feel it quite strongly that I tried lots of things, I'd done many studies, let's say, careers as well, because I did make money out of the various little ventures and freelance things that I did. But they weren't giving me something that I was looking for. So even though I'd seen through this, I was still kind of looking for something akin to it. And even though I had various projects in progress, like at the time, let's say we go back to something like 2015, I would have been heavily into long distance cycling. I was also a Samaritans volunteer. So if you're not in the UK, you probably won't have heard of Samaritans, but they're a service that it's a listening service. So people who are going through some kind of distress or despair and they just need to talk to someone. There are a set of volunteers. It's a voluntary organisation, and you can reply via email. You can contact them via email or by phone, and the volunteer will then respond to you. And if it's on the phone, then it's, in real time. You have a chat, and the volunteer is trained to listen to whatever you want to get off your chest, whatever you're going through, however you want to express that. And they'll help you to kind of work through it. Not work through it as in find a solution, but work through it is in that they help you to express yourself. So that's what I did at that time. And I think I did just started. So 2 kind of fairly big projects going on, and I was quite engaged with them, but at the same time I was feeling this meaninglessness. And especially because I was talking to or listening to suicidal people, and I don't know if I read Camus at that time or somewhere around that time as well, maybe a couple of years later. The idea of suicide was quite high on my mind because I was supporting suicidal people. And so the 2 kind of made sense. Like, okay, there's no meaning, no purpose. And then hearing it from a lot of people that, well, it's kind of pointless, my life's not going anywhere, might as well kill myself. And then here was I talking to people or listening to people who were saying that, well, I'm going to actually do it. It's not just a question, a theoretical, hypothetical idea. I feel this sense of not wanting to be around so intensely that I think, I'm going to do it. So it made me kind of think about the statement over and over again, like, okay, you might as well kill yourself because Everything is pointless. There is no purpose. And like I said, I'd seen through this fallacy of there being a purpose, and I could see that, well, actually there is no purpose, there is no meaning. And therefore, okay, well, that is one option. You can kill yourself. So why don't I do that as well? And I didn't think of it. I didn't think of that as an option for me. For me, it was more like, so what do I do then? It was more like a dilemma of, well, if I'm not looking for meaning and purpose, what am I looking for? So that was more the kind of question or riddle or puzzle that I was kind of thinking through. And I just sort of carried on. I didn't want to suddenly change what I was doing. But I just let the question of, well, what do I do then? What do I do about this? Do I even do anything about it? I just let those questions kind of rattle around for a while, and a while being maybe 2 or 3 years. I went backwards and forwards between feeling whatever the sense of purpose feeling is to the sense of not feeling it. And then eventually there was the penny dropping moment. And the penny dropping moment was the why. The why do I do anything then? If there's no meaning, why? And it sounds super obvious and super simple, but as with these kind of obvious and super simple ideas, when the penny finally drops, it's as a result of a lot of cogitation and reflection, going backwards and forwards, until it's succinct, and then you realize, well, there's no point, there's no meaning, there's nothing kind of written to tell me I should live my life according to this set of rules or these precepts. I can do whatever I like or not do, but why? And the why is because I want to. I want to just, see the world as a kind of buffet lunch of so many different things I could do, so many people I could meet, so many different places I could go. And it's just a question of, I want to go there, or I want to do that, I want to meet that person. For no other reason, not to achieve meaning or status, it's just because I want to. And just like any other human being, I do have that survival instinct. Like I said, that is built into us. Our DNA is using us as an Uber to go from one generation to the next. And so the longer that we can survive, the further it can go. And it's competing with all this other DNA that's out there in the gene pool. So it's in its interest to create an organism that will be instinctively trying to keep itself alive. So even though logically it is maybe obvious then that it follows, oh well, if there's no purpose, then just kill yourself. But because of the innate survival instinct, that's not too easy. You can't just override that. It's a bit like telling a smoker, right, you should give up smoking because it's bad for you. They're not going to just do it overnight. Whether they actually manage it is very, very unlikely. So there was the penny drop. Because I want to. Why do I ride my bike? Why did I don't ride my bike anymore, and I don't volunteer for Samaritans, but I did then, and I was really engaged with it. And why did I? Because I wanted to. And it sounds so simple and obvious, but it didn't occur to me at the time until I'd thought about it and kind of just went through this puzzle in my mind. It's like, well, if there's no meaning or purpose, then what is the point? Well, the point is that I want to. And it suddenly all made sense that, it doesn't matter what I do, and I do it because I want to do it. And it makes it sort of much easier in terms of not finding a purpose. You know, even though I've seen through the fact that there is no purpose, the feeling of purposelessness doesn't just go away like that. You know, the feeling is still there. But this kind of makes up for it. And the fact that I do things because I want to do them, and then I stop doing them and I don't want to do them anymore, takes away that whole obligation of having to find a purpose or follow your purpose, or because that does not exist. But doing this meant that gradually the feeling of meaninglessness, purposelessness, gradually sort of drifted away into the background. It still comes back again every now and then, but it's so kind of small and fleeting. It doesn't really bother me. It doesn't make me kind of sit down and ponder like, oh, so how do I find meaning in my life? Well, it's just made up. But there's another meaning to the word point. So I'm now using the word meaning in the sense of using a symbol to encapsulate an idea. So bottle means this thing. This means bottle, which would mean some, another word like French bouteille. So they use a different symbol. So the word point, 2-point verb, the point. So previously I was using the word point, and I was using that in the same sort of group as meaning and purpose, that there is a sense of wanting, a sense of direction, if you like. But now, let's go back to Camus' idea of you might as well kill yourself because there is no point of doing anything. So now I'm translating that point as there is no chance of you being able to finish a thing. So what is a thing? Let's say a book. A book is a unit. It's a collection of pages and chapters and so on, enclosed in a cover, hard cover, soft cover, or you might have, I don't know, like cycle rides I used to do. It might be a 200-kilometer ride. So that is a ride. So that's a unit of measuring that thing. And these units are absolutely arbitrary. So the point is, well, what is the point of doing anything such as reading a book if you're going to die? Or then you might as well not start. So I'm saying, okay, let's just examine that for a moment. Or starting a career. Let's say you wanted to, do something, quite substantial, like becoming a doctor. And 7 years medical school, and then, a lot more studying, and then being whatever it's called in a hospital where you have to do all the training. It's quite a big undertaking. So if there's no meaning or purpose to life, what is the point? The point is that, or the point here I'm saying is that you shouldn't bother starting because you're not going to finish. So take something smaller, like a book. Well, what's the point of even starting a book? Because I don't know if I'll finish it. But, you see, the definition is arbitrary. A book is a unit of measure of a collection of pages. And each of those pages have different amounts of words on them, depending on how big the print is, how big the format of the book, whether it's pocket book or I don't know. But you see what I'm getting at. It can be like 100 pages, it can be 1,000 pages, but it's still just called a book. And you don't want to start the book. So this is just your kind of mental reasoning way of looking at it. That, oh well, I don't know if I'm ever going to finish that, so I might as well not start it. Or, I don't know, let's say learning the guitar. You have this feeling like you want to learn the guitar, but you don't start because you feel that it's going to be pointless, because it's going to take so long, so much practice that you don't know if you're going to live that long even. So if you don't know how long you're going to live, like, if you take it statistically, then we look at the population, we look at the lifespan, and you see that within the last 100 years, I don't know, let's say it's 85. So if you take the sort of bell curve and find the median and then the standard deviation, then the lifespan in Western Europe is sort of there. So you can say, all right, well, I'm probably going to live that long, but you also don't know. And it could be another 3 or 4 years, it could be another 30 or 40 years. You don't know. And that can make you kind of feel like, well, should I start then? But start what? When you say start, you've also got an end point in mind. So the start and end point delineate the unit, and that unit is set up or demarcated or created by somebody else. And whether you succeed or fail at completing that unit, so for example this thing, right, this is This is 1 litre. So that is a unit of measure that somebody else made up and that most of us conform to. Most of us meaning probably all of us, right? When it comes to units of measure, of volume or quantity or weight. But a book, for example. How was the length of the book decided? Maybe it wasn't one person. Maybe it was the author, the publisher, the editor. You know, you write a first draft, that's, I don't know, 80,000 words, and then the proofreader then, or the editor and the publisher then said, well, let's see how it looks in the second draft. And they said, you know, chapter 16 goes off at a bit of a tangent. Let's take that out. Comes down to 60,000 words. And then, I don't know, something else happens, such as, you know, chapter 23, can you rewrite that? Then it goes up to 62,000 words. So eventually it goes through these versions until you settle at a certain length. So rather than pages or format of the pages, let's just say number of words. So it starts off at 80,000 words, goes down to 50,000, settles at somewhere around 65,000. Publisher says, right, let's do it. Publishes the book. And that is then the unit. So those three people, the author, the publisher, and the editor, they have then decided, okay, this is not the final, because you could just carry on, couldn't you? You could just keep like tweaking and tweaking, like, oh, this sentence doesn't quite work with that wording, let's change it. So then, you know, it's a tiny edit, but it does change it. Or like someone painting, you know, they'll start with just the sketch, and then they'll do some kind of a wash, then they'll, you know, put on certain colors, and then it's like layering and layering, and at some point they decide, okay, I'm done with this now. So the size of the unit is not decided by you, but you then accept the idea of that unit. And the point is whether you can finish that unit. So if I set myself the challenge of drinking this whole liter of water, this is water by the way, of drinking this whole bottle. See, I'm saying this whole, the entirety. Well, what is that? It's a size, it's a volume that's decided by somebody else. It's not like an absolute entity, but I'm taking it as though it is an absolute entity. Like, just to stay with the idea of the book, that the book is an absolute thing. It's not, it's arbitrary. It's a collection of words and chapters and pages, and it only applies to that, the length only applies to that particular book. But then a whole lot of repercussions will result from whether you manage to finish the book. And you want to make sure that if you start it, so this is just like a thing that a lot of people, a kind of mental song and dance that a lot of people go through, is that they won't start something because they don't feel like they're going to make any progress, and they're not going to see it through to the end, and therefore, well, let's not even start. So what's it like reading a book? You don't open the book, look at it, and then you've read the book. Reading the book, let's say the book has 50 chapters and it takes me an hour per chapter, just to make up some numbers. That's 50 hours, you know, at the speed that I read. You might read faster, you might read slower, but in order to read that book all the way through, you are going to need 50 hours. Are you going to live? Are you going to be alive between now and the 50 hours required to read that book? You don't know. And when you read the book, let's say here's something I've been writing. And if I read this, what's it actually like in the moment? What is the process? You're not like, let's say this page that I've created. I don't read it like, right, I've read it. Now, unless I'm like a super fast speed reader, I read it a phrase at a time. And I like to read aloud. That's one of the things I really enjoy. So in real time, I would be reading like this. And rather than argue the logic of that statement and focus on the feeling that goes with it, I want to focus more on the everything is a waste of time statement. So I've been writing about what I've been talking about. So you see, there is a speed at which you read the book. So when you're actually reading the book, not thinking about reading the book or whether you can start and see your way through to the end, what you're doing is reading it sentence by sentence. You're in the book. And when you're actually reading it and you are engaging with the story and you're into the world that the author has created, you can sort of put aside the whole business of should I start it, can I finish it, how long is the book, how many pages in this chapter. You can sort of lose yourself in that story, in that world, connect with those characters, connect with the plot. But this, what's the point, and what's the whether you can finish, should you start, these are questions that a lot of people have, and it stops them doing things. And also, longer term goals such as learning a language or learning an instrument, which is a bigger undertaking, but it's the same process when you're learning a language. Like I was saying with this, it's not like you've learnt it. You learn a word or a phrase and you learn it at a certain speed, and you can't go any faster. There may be techniques to help you learn so you don't have to repeat things, but like I said, in French this is bouteille, and in English is bottle, in German what is it, Flasche, and there you go, you've learnt a word and then you build on that. So in the same way that I was reading phrases, sentences, one sentence, next sentence, that's how it happens in real time. And the point, if you like, is this whole business about the journey or the destination. So let's take the idea of a road trip. The road trip is not about getting there. The road trip is all about being in the car and being on the road. So either you're driving, if you're going on your own, then it's just you, or if you're going with some friends, you're in the car, and it's the being in the car that is the point. Once you arrive at your destination, your road trip is over. So, I don't know, let's say a long trip. Let's say you're going from New York to Los Angeles. That's a long trip. And you can start off by saying, oh, should I even start? Will I even make it? It doesn't matter whether you're going to make it or not. The point is being in the car, feeling the sense of movement, listening to the music while you're driving, watching the scenery, stopping at various places, obscure, out of the way places maybe, studying the maps. And nowadays you've got GPS, or you might make no GPS part of your trip and say, no, we're gonna go old school and use maps. There may be certain topics of conversation that come up during the trip. That is the road trip. Once you arrive, it's the end of the trip. The same with the book. It's the reading the book and being in that author's world and getting to know those characters. And once you finish the book, it's gone. Or it's the learning the language, or picking up the guitar and fumbling, like, oh, does that finger go there and there? The success or the failure is defined by somebody else, because they have chosen the beginning and the end points. But once you've made the start, and you don't know, like the beginning and end point could be me here now at this point, and then my death at some arbitrary time in the future, which is my lifespan, if you like. Well, from when I was born, but the rest of my life is from now until I die. And the point is, doing whatever is fun because you want to, and not really worrying too much about whether you're going to make it, whether you're going to succeed or fail, because that is all defined by somebody else. And I know it can be hard to put that thinking and way of looking at it and the feeling of maybe I'm not going to make it aside, but the point is that you jump in. And if you think of it like a road trip, then you are very much focused on the journey, being in the car, listening to the music, looking at the map, stopping at some obscure roadside cafe and wondering whether it was a good idea or not, whether you're going to make it, and then realizing, well, doesn't matter if we make it, we could stop here, sell the car, get a plane. We're completely open to deciding what we do now. And the same with the book. You might get halfway through and decide, I don't like this book anymore. Put it down. There's no pressure on you to finish the book. There was no pressure on you to start the book, but you felt like, oh, reading is good, or maybe I should, or someone told me I might like this book. And learning a language, well, when do you say that you've done it? I mean, even a native speaker is still continuing to learn, obviously a lot more slowly because they don't need to, unless they're reading literature or they're studying language. Like, they don't need to actually improve their language skills, but once you get to a certain level where you can converse, there isn't like a huge demand on you. But it's the doing it that is the point, not the having done it, not the seeing the list of ticks, because that list of ticks of like I did this, Well, what were those things? They were just things that were defined by somebody else. And you then decided, right, I will take up that challenge, climb Mount Everest. Well, the size of that mountain is not really relevant. It's the climbing that is relevant. That is the point. That's when you're kind of in it, in the moment, and doing it. Once you've done it, well, then it's over. Then you're doing something else. You're back here talking about it or thinking about it. You're not doing it. Like now, I'm talking about reading a book as the thing to do, whether you should or shouldn't do it. But I'm talking about it. I'm not actually reading a book. And so the point, well, there is, so just to sum up then, it's where my rambling is going to be reaching an hour or so soon. To sum up then, first of all, we're talking about purpose and meaning and the point, and actually there isn't any. And from a biological point of view, you survive, reproduce, your job is done. And if there is no meaning, then because we are led to believe that there should be a meaning, you're left with a feeling of meaninglessness. What do you do with that? Well, not much really. You just have to feel it. And the feeling, for me, gradually went away when I realized that I do things because I want to, because I feel an urge to go in a certain direction, and nothing more than that. There's no purpose to it other than to just explore and see what happens if I meet that person, or I go to that place, or I do that activity, or give it a try. And then, you know, the urge gradually disappears and I move on to the next thing. So if there's no meaning, no purpose, what is the point? What is the point of starting something if you can't finish it? If you there's no point to doing it. You don't gain any particular value from it, and you're going to die at some point, so all that you've achieved will be lost. So again, you do it because you want to do it, and whether you're going to finish something, well, you don't know. You might start training to be a doctor, and you might die during that process. You don't know. You can't predict the future, so that shouldn't stop you from making a start. And the whole thing of the start and the end point is defined by somebody else. And when you're actually doing that something, you're in it, you're engaged with it, you're in the moment. The whole idea of starting, finishing, that all disappears. And you're just doing it. And it's fun, and you're doing it because you want to do it. And you don't care whether you finish, whatever finish is. You've reached the finish line, as I said, defined by somebody else. Arbitrary. So don't believe in meaning, don't believe in the finish line, and don't believe in a destination. Those are fallacies. Put them to one side and just do what you want to do. And when you had enough, stop. Well, I've had enough of talking about this, so I'm going to stop, but hopefully that clears up a few things, and hopefully you will do things that you will enjoy and have some fun. That's it for now. Bye bye.